We're standing in front of a relic of Britain's lost past. It's a bison. And just like most of the other animals in this wonderful hall at the Oxford Museum of Natural History, it's extinct. Britain has lost almost all of its iconic megafauna, from the mammoths that roam the north, to the beavers and hippos that wallowed in the Thames, to the elephants, rhinos and cave lions that roam the grasslands. All gone.
Britain is the most wildlife depleted country in Europe, and all the amazing ecosystem functions that these animals would have provided vanished with them. But perhaps that doesn't have to be forever.
What's that? Have you got food?
Mm-hmm.
What is it?
Stroopwafel.
Can I try?
Wait.
Boom.
It's half waffle,
Yeah.
half biscuit,
Yeah.
and it's filled with caramel.
Okay, let me have a try. Oh, it is actually quite good.
It's good, yeah. So, do you want to tell me why we're sat on a bench in a field in the Netherlands?
Yes. So we're now 30 miles outside Amsterdam, and even though we're making a story about rewilding Britain, this is where we begin. Because in the 1980s, there was an incredible period of ecological restoration at a place really close to here called Oostervardersplasen.
It's quite a mouthful.
I'm going to call it OVP from now on. It was the site of some really game-changing observations about the impacts of animals on vegetation, and all our sort of rewilding knowledge kind of grew out from that.
So this is where rewilding
This is
all
where
started.
rewilding began, yeah.
It's also a really cool place because they drained it from the sea. So where do you think sea level is now?
I'm going to say down there by the pond.
Yeah, you're completely wrong, but it was a good guess. Actually, I can show you where sea level is right now. Watch this, this is going to be really cool.
You've got my waffle.
This is how high up it is. This is sea level.
Really?
And you're all the way down there. Yeah.
That's so high. I wouldn't have known that. That's
Isn't that
amazing.
crazy?
Yeah.
Do you want your waffle back?
Yeah, go on then.
Right. Here you go.
That was an awful throw.
That was an awful catch. We're going to go quietly. I won't let you hit a tree.
I can't see anything.
It's fine. We have to keep our voices down though for this particular surprise.
What are we looking for?
You're going to see in a second. I think you'll like it. Right. I'm just going to... We'll stop us here. Okay, and you can open your eyes. Look at that.
Oh my God, it's bison.
It's bison. He's huge. He's absolutely huge. How's that for a surprise? Europe's largest megafauna.
It's amazing. Oh my goodness, look at that.
Look at that. They're just going into the grass. I've never seen anything this big in Europe before.
So it's just amazing seeing these bison in action and just seeing what they've created as well, because you've got this whole mosaic. You've got the short grasses, the longer grasses, the woodland, the reeds.
And it's all because the bison have come in and essentially smashed everything up.
Yeah.
And just let everything else come up. And we've been watching them for 5 minutes now, and they just keep vanishing in. And Europe's largest animal are just gone like that.
It's just amazing. We don't have this in the UK at all.
It's completely gone, and the job they're doing now, nothing is doing that in Britain anymore, in the wild.
Everything's too small to do this on this scale.
We've both had some encounters with buffalo on foot before.
Yeah.
How long do you think you'd last if someone threw you on the back of one of those bison? You know, like they do in America with the cowboys and they're holding on.
I don't know. I mean, maybe like 3 or 4 minutes.
You think you could last on the back of a bison in 3 or
reckon
4
if
minutes?
If you grab the horns and kind of you sat behind the hump.
Apparently, I think in America they've got this national bull riding thing, and I think 12 seconds is reckoned as a pretty good go.
So that was the most amazing surprise. I did not
Good,
know
I'm
you were
glad.
taking me to see European bison.
Oh, fantastic.
We're going to Oostervardersplasen next, which is
Yes.
the big sort of rewilding thing, why we came here in the first place.
Yeah, we should probably go see that.
Do I have to shut my eyes this time?
No,
Again?
because it's like 20 miles away.
Right, let's go.
So we've come all this way to the Netherlands, but the reason why the rewilding here at Oostervardersplasen is actually really important to British rewilding is it completely changed our understanding of the landscape around here before man and humans turned up. We thought that the British and the kind of European landscape was this vast kind of primeval forest. But actually, the experiments that were done here proved that this wasn't the case, and it fundamentally reshuffled and challenged our understanding of European ecology. So we made it, we're here, we're in OVP. They call it the Serengeti behind the dikes, which I think is quite beautiful. And if we were in the Serengeti, we'd be crouched behind this log, looking for a lion or a zebra, and we're looking at a horse. It's a very nice horse. It's really quite beautiful, actually, but it's a horse.
It is a horse, but it's a very special horse.
Okay.
So it's a conic horse, and it's less important about what it is and the fact that it doesn't look that exciting. It's more about its role in the ecosystem as a grazer. So creating these lovely, vast, open grasslands that you see. And it's actually that observation of early grazers that started this whole project in the first place. But it wasn't with a horse like this, it was with a load of geese.
Well, I'm glad we didn't come all the way to the Netherlands to look at geese. This is a really old breed of horse, isn't it? This is really primitive. This is as close to Ice Age, pre-human horses as we can get. So actually this is quite a special horse, doing a very special job in a very special place, under a very special tree.
Well, you know, the tree doesn't have any impact. The tree's just there. It's quite nice.
The changes observed on Oostervardersplasen allowed the ecologists to create a theory to describe the impact of these megaherbivores on the land. We begin with megaherbivores grazing on the open grasslands. But the impacts of this grazing are spread unevenly. So in some areas, small bushes can develop, forming havens for other plants and saplings of baby forest trees. Protected by these bushes, the saplings form small groves of trees which spread onto the grasslands. These groves eventually grow larger, forming a mature forest. In the end, the older trees die and collapse, creating clearings in the forest where once again the grasses can grow. Attracted by the grass, grazers move back into the clearings. And to get there, they bulldoze trails through the underbrush, breaking up the forest. This trampling and grazing widens the clearings, and as the clearings link up, open grassland is created, attracting yet more megaherbivores, and the cycle repeats. But this experiment came at a cost.
Actually, I'm seeing much less herbivores than I thought I was going to see.
Yeah, so we really can't see much. There's one heck cattle over there lying down, one conic horse in a fold there, and a load of geese behind us.
I'm glad we saw the OVP geese.
But the whole reason OVP was/is famous is because of these huge herds of herbivores.
And I think if we came 15 years ago, we would have seen much less vegetation and huge herds of conic horses, huge herds of these quite magnificent heck cattle.
It's so controversial what happened here. The fact that they started this whole project with a very hands-off approach. It was almost no management at all. And in the absence of any carnivores, numbers just skyrocketed, and in the winter, a load of them died, and it was thousands and thousands of these herbivores died, and it created this public outrage, this animal welfare
crisis. And I guess for that reason, a lot of people might think this is a failure, and a lot of people might challenge that and say, no, this is a natural boom and bust cycle. You see these things in nature regularly. You know, prey numbers go up, carnivores go up, prey goes down, carnivores go down. It's a cycle. And, you know, climate and winter is a natural regulator of population. So I think there's a lot of debate here.
And I think it depends on which ecologist you ask, whether they see this as a success or a failure. But like we said, that doesn't really matter. It's sort of the lessons that we learn here and how we can take those forwards, rather than just labelling it as a success or a failure, I think.
Yeah. So we've kind of
done our usual thing and rambled on for a while.
We're good at that.
Yeah, we are good at that. What have we learned? Because we've walked around for a bit. I think there's quite a bit to take away from here.
I think there's a lot we can learn from here, and I find it interesting that people always use the excuse in the UK that it's too small or too densely populated.
Yeah.
Yet look at the Netherlands, it's absolutely tiny, yet they've managed to create this. Part of the reason why that is because the Dutch have always been very sort of proactive and had to engineer the landscape into canals or...
They're always battling against the sea.
Yeah, I mean, where we're staying is completely reclaimed land from the sea.
And I guess if this amount of land was free in the UK, well, it just wouldn't be. There'd be people living on it. A lot of the landscapes we're conserving in Britain, the great forests, the heathers, the moors, the chalk commons, aren't actually natural. They're artificially managed, and they're artificially created because we got rid of the megaherbivores. If you do have the natural megafauna, it reverts to this kind of bush grassland. We should probably actually get back to Britain now, considering we're making a film about rewilding Britain.
Yeah, we probably should. Why don't we go to Kent?
Kent sounds fantastic.
They're bringing back bison.
Exactly. Let's look at megaherbivores in Kent. Yeah, let's go. We need to get to Kent now. Can we get a transition for that? Ah, Kent. Weather's not as nice.
No, it's not, but we can go find the man with the bison plan.
Okay, I'm ready. Let's go. Let's do
shall we
it.
go?
Yeah. I hope his name rhymes with plan.
Stan Smith is the Wilder Landscapes Manager at the Kent Wildlife Trust, who's overseeing the reintroduction of bison to the Blean woodland in Kent. In Britain, a lot of the headlines around rewilding focus on the predators, but it's clear that rewilding begins by centering the role of the megaherbivores, and there is a plan to bring these iconic mammals back to Britain.
Robi. Nice to see you. Great stuff. Shall we sit down in these very conveniently placed chairs?
Let's do it.
Okay.
So Stan, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. And I guess the main big question, or two big questions, is why bison and why Blean?
I think the bigger question is why not? I mean, you've seen bison in the Netherlands. It's such a fantastic kind of charismatic species. We know they can do fantastic things for our environments. Blean is 3 miles from the centre of Canterbury, a big city. If we can make a wilding project work here, surely we can make it work anywhere.
You've been working on this project for a few years now, and so if you had to pick one fantastic bison fact to share with everyone, what would that be?
I learnt the other day that a bison can go and choose a particular plant to roll around in. It's called cherry laurel, and they roll around in this plant and then they pee on it and then they rub all that all over themselves, and they think that's insect repellent. I mean, bison create their own insect repellent. How cool is that?
So Stan, what will the role of the bison be in this habitat? What's sort of the end goal of the bison here?
Yeah, we want bison in there to mix things up. What you can see here is all these trees are in straight lines. They have all been planted here. What these are is a very long-term crop. They weren't planted here for nature, they were planted here for money. We've never had this big Corsican pine type tree here, and so none of our native wildlife is evolved to cope with this type of habitat. So although it looks like a woodland, there's really no space for nature here. This is exactly the sort of thing that we think that bison will be able to tackle. Bison will actually tackle the trunks of trees, and so over time we expect to start to see these trees thin out. We have seen trees in sort of captive situations where they've been completely carved out on one side by bison rubbing up against them, and that's before they even start eating them. I mean, give this a shove. It is pretty tough.
This isn't going to work, but okay, come on, I need you with me. I can't do this on their own. Yep, I can't do it.
No.
I'm not a big hairy cow. That's fine. We'll get the bison to do it for us. So this is really interesting. This is one of the fences that's been put up because these bison, as we've seen, are huge animals, and if they can knock down trees like we just saw, that's a lot of force. Can you tell us about how both people and bison are going to be able to kind of live in this space, enjoy this space, walk in this space, all safely and together?
Although it's kind of a big shiny metal fence, the point is that the bison should never really want to test it. So we have made sure that they've got everything they could possibly want. It's lovely, thick, dense vegetation in there, loads of space for bison to eat, lots of ponds for them to drink from, and lots of kind of space for them to just hang out and do whatever they want to do. So we've really tried to, whilst keeping everybody safe, keep this to a minimum, really. We didn't want Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
We didn't want...
Because we know how that went.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got several movies telling us how that went.
Exactly, so you've got to keep those animals happy, you've got to sort of respect their behaviours. Because in this country bison are classed as a dangerous wild animal, and that's a legal term, we have to have these fences.
And I guess that's the difference between when these bison arrive and bison which you might see in a zoo or a wildlife park. There is a little bit more of an element of wild there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the difference here is they're not here to be on display for people. If someone gets to see a bison, brilliant. That's not going to be every day. That's going to be a real fantastic wildlife experience. But most of the time, they're off doing their own thing, being bison, exhibiting their natural behaviours, and that's what we want. We don't want to mollycoddle these things. They need to be wild animals.
I imagine as well a really important step in reconnecting humans as well to the natural world, because we've lost that connection so much. Having a little bit more wild, I think, will be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's a whole sort of idea about rewilding yourself as well as rewilding the landscape. I mean, people will stand in queue to get a 10-second thrill on a roller coaster. You know, you'd queue up for hours to do that. Well, nature can give you that. Nature can give you that kind of experience. I guarantee if you stand one side of the fence and there's a bison on the other side, your heart is going to be pounding.
How important has that been in this journey to keep the public engaged and let them know sort of what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been critical at every single stage of this project. Before we did anything on site, we had to figure out who all our neighbours were and who all the people were who were using the site. We found we've got 25 direct neighbours, and we went and knocked on the doors of absolutely everybody to say, what do you think about having a big furry cow near your back garden? And luckily, everyone was really, really excited about it, which is great. You know, that process never stops. You know, we've been visiting lots of village halls and talking to everybody, all users of the site. We have volunteers on site who are meeting people and greeting people to tell them all the stuff that's going on. And that's going to continue for years to come, you know, but this is an ever-evolving and ever-changing thing of how this woodland changes and has changed for hundreds of years and will continue to change. And so it's just about how we meet the needs of people and the needs of wildlife and redress that balance, I think.
Megaherbivores like bison play a disproportionately large role in the functioning of healthy ecosystems. Their grazing breaks up woodland, their browsing controls the growth of young trees. By defecating, they fertilise the soil. By smashing through vegetation, they create pathways through forests and create microhabitats. And their wallowing creates wetlands. And in death, they provide a bonanza of food and nutrients for scavengers and predators. On an ecological level, this causes disturbance of plants and supports parasites, scavengers and predators, as well as all the smaller creatures that live in the microhabitats that bison create. This aids seed dispersal and the spread of nutrients throughout the landscape.
Blean is joining a family of small-scale, ambitious and interlinked projects across Europe that use this iconic animal. The European bison has got to be one of the ultimate symbols of rewilding.
Robi.
Yeah.
Have you seen any brown, furry ecosystem engineers?
I haven't, but I think we're in the right place, because here on the River Otter, it's one of the best places in England to see beavers.
And are we looking for legal beavers or illegal beavers?
I love that we have both.
No.
So, in 2008, it was discovered that there were beavers living here on this river, of completely unknown origin. No one knew how they got here. So the government initially planned to have them removed, but in the nick of time, conservationists jumped in and proposed a 5-year trial to look at the effects of the beavers on the landscape here.
And excitingly, in summer of 2020, the trial came to a close, and these beavers have now been offered legal protection and they're now allowed to stay.
They're now legal beavers.
They're legal beavers, and this is very exciting because it's the first time in British history that an extinct mammal has been brought back and been given legal status.
Oh wow, look at this.
This is amazing. This is a beaver dam, and it's huge and it's so compact. It's made of debris and sticks and mud, and it's just holding back this huge body of water.
The dam itself is pretty big. That's 6 meters or more across that way, and it's holding back a whole pond.
And it's just phenomenal that something natural
Yeah.
can hold back this body of water.
Busy beavers, they've been busy.
Busy beavers. But we can't actually see all the dam, and I kind of want a better look. Shall we go and see
Yeah.
if we can see the other
And
side?
we might get a sense of scale if we go and have a
Yeah.
look at it that way. Wow, it's actually much bigger when you look at it from this side.
Yeah, it really is. Wow, you get the whole scale of the dam. You've got the pond behind and the lovely river going downstream. And actually you can see here, it's really slowing down the flow of the water. And all that dam as well will be holding back loads of sediment, which again would reduce erosion, which is another benefit.
And actually you can see the water this side of the dam is noticeably actually much clearer.
You can almost drink from that.
Yeah.
So, do you want to have a look at some beaver trimmings? Robi, come look at this.
Oh cool, look at that.
So this is a telltale sign that beavers are in the area. So this is actually beaver teeth marks. They would have been in the process of taking down this big tree, but it's not very fresh.
Yeah.
So you may laugh. And I told you I would show you my beaver trimmings. So, ta-da! Here's some beaver trimmings I prepared earlier. But these would have been sort of like that.
Okay.
And that wasn't what the beavers were looking for. They were hoping to get to the sort of fresher, younger bark underneath, all the little shoots as they take down the tree.
This is how they change the landscape that we're in.
Told you beaver trimmings were cool.
They are very cool. I have found that little pond I was going to show you about.
Oh,
It's just over there.
amazing.
Should we go have a look?
Thank
You'll
you.
like this.
I'm excited. Let's go.
This is what I wanted to show you. This is
Oh,
a really
wow.
lovely example of why
This
beavers
is amazing.
are keystone species. Now you need to catch me if I fall, okay?
I will, I will.
That's
Don't
your
worry.
job. So this is the beaver dam I found earlier. The dam is here, the pond has built up behind it and it's flooded this area. And this is really nice because it kind of shows just why beavers are considered a keystone species. They support everything else. And what's really interesting here is, as we were seeing,
Kingfisher.
did you see that had something in his mouth?
Did it? Oh, that's so cool.
And I think we scared it off. Okay, and so you can see all these bits of kind of vegetation, which we've been seeing earlier, they've been gnawing and chewing down. They've rammed them into the mud at the bottom. It's really rich mud. And they're doing this because they're going to come back to them and feed on them over winter. But actually, these little saplings take root. So you've got these kind of floating islands of vegetation, which creates all the habitats for all the other cool wetland life that we like. And in particular, it's the fish that benefit. Because you can see there's loads of insects that are buzzing around our faces because they're laying their eggs in this still water. And that's really good for baby fish like salmon and trout. And there's been really cool studies in Europe which show that salmon and trout babies in the beaver ponds are larger than those outside the beaver ponds. But I think my favourite little beaver connection, which really shows how beavers underpin the health of everything else here, is the bats. Because all these flying insects are food for the bats. And as the beavers come in and they selectively take down riverside trees, they create these avenues that the bats can forage down and feed. So beavers are good for fish and they're good for bats.
I love that.
I think that's
Beavers and
great.
bats. That sounds like the ultimate combo.
Yeah. Why is it whenever we go out looking for wildlife, we always end up in a tree?
Trees are the best place to talk about
Yeah,
wildlife.
that's- Okay, I'll give you that.
And this is actually a relevant tree.
Oh good, I'm glad it's a
Yeah, I
relevant tree,
didn't
yeah.
drag you up a random tree. This is actually a tree that beavers have taken down, and it's a willow. So this is one of their favourite foods, and that's a huge misconception about beavers, is that they eat fish. They don't. They're strict vegetarians, and they'll eat bark, little leaves, shoots, things like willow, aspen, poplar, ash. They're all their favourites. And so you can see here, this is what they're after. These
So
sort
they
of,
went for this, not the log.
yeah.
Yeah.
If this was younger, they might go for some of the fresher bark,
Yeah.
but this is more what they're looking for. And the amazing thing about these types of trees, because they co-evolved with beavers, is that even if they're snapped, they'll grow back, and that's called coppicing. So they can actually grow back into these hedge-like structures.
Yeah, and we've seen them along the river so far, haven't we?
Yeah, and it's perfect habitat for other things like little birds or amphibians, reptiles, anything. So it's a really important habitat for a whole variety of different species. And beavers are proving popular. A recent poll found that around 86% of Britons surveyed were in favour of the reintroduction of these tenacious engineers. However, a vocal and powerful minority remain opposed to beavers. And the main reason is the impact of beaver dams on fish populations, particularly on native fish like salmon and trout, which have to migrate from the sea upstream in order to breed. But if we look at this dam behind us, you can see it's leaky and it's porous. Salmon and trout would actually have no problem moving upstream and navigating this beaver dam.
And I guess a point to remember is that obviously salmon and trout and beavers have all co-evolved in Britain for thousands of years before any people turned up. And so the salmon must have ways deep in their genetics that they can actually get through those dams. We're just a few metres away from this lovely female beaver who's just taken this tree down. And I think for me, that's what makes the beaver a bit different from the predators and the mega herbivores. There she is, look. Is that the beaver came back? There it is. She's coming right up. Hello.
The United Kingdom is the largest country in Europe and quite possibly the world that has lost all of its big carnivores. Across the Channel, carnivores are making an astonishing comeback. Wolves have spread across the continent, bear numbers have doubled in the past 40 years, and the lynx has been successfully reintroduced in a dozen locations, but Britain is lagging behind. It has been claimed that Britain is too small for carnivores, but Belgium and the Netherlands have recently recorded their first wolf sightings. It's also said that carnivores would prove too expensive to control. Not that this has stopped less wealthy nations like Romania or Bulgaria. Perhaps it's less to do about suitability and more to do with attitudes.
Hello.
Hello.
Ooh, my God.
There's more.
Of?
Books demonising predators.
Oh, okay, so you've been to the library then.
Went to the local library and
Yeah.
so got your classics. The Red
Little
Riding Hood.
Yeah, Big Bad Wolf.
Big Bad Wolf.
Okay.
Sly Fox Red Hen.
Yeah, okay. The
Sly
fox is the
Fox.
bad guy.
Fox is
He
bad.
looks very sly.
Three Little Pigs.
I know how this one ends. Yeah, okay.
That's a bear. Anyway, Big Bad Bear.
Big Bad Bear.
And then this one, even on the front, you see it's
Yeah.
negative perception towards predators.
Okay, so I'm sensing a bit of a theme here. I think when it comes to predators in Britain, oh yeah, it's eating the pigs. Yeah. When it comes to predators in Britain, actually, it's a people problem, it's a perception problem, as much as an ecological one.
This is why we have the perceptions we do.
Okay.
This is what children are reading.
It goes
and
all the
why
way back to the
you have
beginning.
Perceptions.
You're going to take them all back to the library now? Okay. Well, you've made your point.
And one man knows a lot about predator reintroduction. Derek Gow is an ecologist and farmer who thinks it's high time for Britain to bring back one of its lost carnivores, the Eurasian lynx. So, Mr. Gow, would you be able to tell us about these lynx and why we need them back in the wild in Britain?
We
are not capable of sustaining our own lives if we're going to go down the road of creating a landscape where there's literally no other life. If we want to live on an island or on a planet with abundant wildlife, how we go about restoring some of these species. And lynx might be one of the creatures that we could restore to the British Isles once again.
So ecologically speaking, what is the role of these lynx? What would they do if you put them out into the wild?
So one of the things that lynx would do is they would disperse and predate upon roe deer, and which are pretty hard animals to cull back to a level where you get forest regeneration. They're also very effective killers of foxes and very effective killers of badgers. And these smaller predators can have a significant effect on things like ground nesting birds and other species which are becoming increasingly rare in a landscape where their own living space is very limited.
So we've spoken to a researcher up at the University of Stirling in Scotland who did some habitat modelling, and they actually found that there was only one area in all of Scotland and all of the UK that would sustain a population of lynx viable over 100 years. Do you agree with this, or do you think there's other habitat in Britain that might support these animals?
I think many of these creatures are adaptable, and when you look at what we think they're going to do and then you look at what they can do, the two things are very different. You know, animals and birds can fit into landscapes that we don't think are ideal because what we're studying is something that's an optimal living situation rather than a realistic one.
People see one of the biggest threats of these lynx in the wild as being on livestock and to sheep farmers. Do you think there is a genuine concern there? And if so, how can we address this and mitigate it?
These are going to kill sheep. Wolves would kill sheep at the end, but then you've got to bear in mind that if you're going to say, well, we remove these animals because they kill sheep, domestic dogs kill 16,000 sheep a year. It's down to whether we have the cultural will to do it or not. And when you look at something like lynx and you look at all the discussions, that's the problem. All the sciencey bits can say, well, this is possible, this is rational, yes, there's a good case for reintroducing this cat, but it's people at the end of the day, and whether people are prepared to accept them or not, that is the major issue.
So if you look at Europe, there's an incredible spread of carnivores across the continent. Obviously they were all persecuted, but the wolves, the bears, the lynx, they're all coming back, they're all spreading. Aside from Britain being an island, are there any other reasons you think that we're so behind the rest of Europe when it comes to restoring our carnivores?
Here, because you know, when people own land, every single bit of this land is yours, mine, hers, theirs. We tend to farm very tight. You know, we're in Devon. Devon's actually in places quite a hard farmed landscape. And that means that to do something like this, well, they wouldn't just exist on my land. I don't care whether they eat my sheep or not, I couldn't care less. But then as soon as you cross that hedge, you're into somebody else's land, and they may very well have a different view. There are people out here who are actually very supportive and very tolerant of nature, but they're tolerant of nature at a level. When something comes along that digs up the maize or feeds on the corn or kills a sheep, then pretty much the instant reaction is it's guns, poison, snares, and that's been a reaction to these creatures, you know, for the last 1,000+ years.
Reintroducing predators incurs potential risks not seen with herbivores, but the mitigation strategies that have been trialled with herbivores in Europe could be successfully applied to carnivores. So how could this work for lynx? Well, reintroduced lynx could be fitted with GPS tags, a GPS border created around farmland. If GPS lynx enter the border area, its ID code is automatically sent to a local wildlife official. If the lynx damages any livestock, farmers can take a photo with a date and location. If these match to a GPS record of a lynx within farmland, a compensatory payment can be sent to the farmer.
Talking to Derek Gow about the lynx reintroduction has been fascinating, but if we're seriously discussing predators in Britain, then we can't ignore the elephant in the room, which is Europe's top predator, the grey wolf. There are many conflicting and exaggerating stories that tell of the death of Britain's last wolf. In truth, no one really knows where the last wolf died and when. It probably lived and died alone, having never found a mate, and no one mourned it when it was gone. But what we do know is that wolves have a long and rich history in Britain. They've lived here far longer than humans ever have, well over 1 million years. And it was the potential return of this apex predator that kickstarted the conversation around rewilding in Britain. And there is strong evidence from across the Atlantic that demonstrates the positive impact of wolves on degraded ecosystems.
In America's Yellowstone National Park, the wolf was hunted to extinction. And as a result of this, deer, which now had no predators, exploded in numbers and overgrazed the vegetation along the riversides. This led to the local extinction of the beaver, which also relied on critical riverside vegetation. But when the wolves were brought back in 1995, everything changed. The wolves reduced the deer numbers through predation, but they also changed the deer's behaviour. The deer began to avoid places like the riverbanks, where they could be caught more easily, and in these places, the vegetation began to recover. The river valleys, previously stripped bare by the deer, began to reforest, and so the numbers of forest birds began to grow as well. And when the riverside vegetation came back, so too did the beavers. The beavers then did all the engineering we've seen on the River Otter in Britain, and so aquatic diversity skyrocketed. The wolves even affected the soil. The riverside trees stabilised the stream banks, reducing erosion, and on the hillsides, the trees sheltered the soils from being whipped away by the harsh winter winds. And by controlling numbers of smaller predators like coyotes, the wolves allowed populations of small mammals and birds to increase. And scavengers like eagles and bears profited from the kills that the wolves didn't finish. And because there were more trees, more bears got through the winter as they could feed on the abundant berries that the trees produced. This is the essence of a trophic cascade. The reintroduction of a single keystone predator transforms the ecology of every aspect of the ecosystem. If the plight of Yellowstone before the wolves sounds familiar, it's because it is. Britain's Highlands, in particular in Scotland, face much of the same problems, and it's mostly to do with deer. With the loss of natural predators like wolves and lynx, and an exclusionary economy based around stag hunting, deer numbers are at their highest for 1,000 years, with over 2 million living in Britain. This is causing intensive overbrowsing in woodlands. Many species cannot cope with this pressure and are forced out, turning forests into monocultures of rhododendron, ivy and brambles, and the invasive pine species that deer won't eat, and this is having serious impacts on wildlife and biodiversity. In the Scottish Highlands, vast herds of red deer have stripped the hillsides bare, leading to rampant erosion, flooding, and an estimated annual damage to agriculture of over £4.3 million. Around 100,000 deer are culled each year by shooting, but this is barely holding numbers in check, and it's not a long-term solution. Rewilders and conservationists hope that the reintroduction of the grey wolf to parts of the Scottish Highlands will control deer numbers and trigger a trophic cascade that will restore the region's degraded and denuded biodiversity. But the wolf is a species with a unique, complex and conflicting cultural perceptions, and as a symbol of rewilding, it's political. We've come to speak to one man who's pushed for wolf reintroduction. George Monbiot is an environmentalist, author and climate activist who knows just how political and complex wolf reintroduction is for a wilder Britain.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. We're really looking forward to speaking to you. We're here in this gorgeous allotment, and we wanted to start by asking you a bit about wolf reintroduction to the UK.
This has been a really interesting journey for us, going from mega herbivores to ecosystem engineers like beavers and now the carnivores. But obviously we can't ignore the elephant in the room, which is the grey wolf.
Can I just first of all point out that the elephant in the room is actually the elephant? These are elephant-dominated ecosystems missing their elephants.
I'd love if we had elephants back.
It is entirely a political issue because ecologically, wolves would be perfectly happy right here, right now. But the obstacles are entirely social and political. And it's about whether people are prepared to see wolves come back. Now, on the continent of Europe, the dynamics are very different because the wolves can bring themselves back and are doing so very successfully. Whereas it's the other way round in the UK. We have to decide, do we put up with the fact that we don't have wolves and accept this situation of a wolfless ecology, or do we take active steps to bring wolves over here? And for speaking for myself, I would love to have wolves back. They are a crucial missing element of our ecologies. They have amazingly rich and important roles within ecosystems, and they're just blinking wonderful. I love them. Yeah. They're wonderful. Even the thought that they might be there, because let's face it, you know, very few people are actually going to see them.
So why is it then that you think wolves get such a bad reputation?
So the principal problem with the wolf from the human point of view is its interaction with livestock. That's what it's really about. Wolves' attacks on humans are extremely rare. I mean, even in North America, where there's quite a lot of wolves, you're more likely to be killed by a vending machine than a wolf. We grossly exaggerate in our minds the risk of big scary animals. The real issue is that it's about livestock. And wolves like eating sheep and other livestock. Actually, they like eating sheep less than they like eating deer. If they've got a choice, even though deer can be harder to catch, they'll go for the deer rather than the sheep. Where we still have predators, always the efforts to eliminate them are led by livestock farmers. If we look at what's happening in North America, these incredibly cruel attacks on wolves and lynx and puma and bears and any other species which can attack livestock, they're always led by livestock farmers.
So now that we know this is a human issue, this is a political issue, is this actually viable? It's a lovely dream, I'm all for it, but politically, economically, socially, is this a viable idea?
There's no reason at all why we can't have wolves here. If you look at Belgium and the Netherlands, much more densely populated countries than ours, they've got wolves, most people there are easy with that. We've got vast areas of land here, which are very lightly populated. If you think of the Scottish Highlands, southern uplands, most of the uplands of England and Wales, there are very few people living there by comparison to anywhere in Belgium or the Netherlands, or indeed large other tracts of Europe where wolves live. There's plenty for them to eat. I mean, we're massively overpopulated with deer in this country. They selectively browse tree seedlings, which are very nutritious. So they look everywhere for the tree seedlings. And if the deer numbers are beyond a certain level, no tree will regenerate. It's the wolves which not only keep the population down without all this massive, intensive human intervention which is required, and also herd them around, creating a mosaic landscape, ensuring that trees come back in some places but less in others, and so you get this great patchwork of habitats, which is wonderful for wildlife.
So in terms of changing those negative perceptions about wolves, what are some of the benefits that wolves can bring to people?
Well, wolves are a powerful agent of ecological restoration. They are a keystone species, an ecological engineer, and they help to ensure that fascinating ecosystems thrive. You need large predators in an ecosystem. Without those large predators, it's all lopsided, and you generally get massive overpopulation of herbivores. And then that cascades down through the whole system, because if all the trees have been eaten, then you don't have the habitats for the huge range of other wildlife which depends on them, everything from songbirds to beavers who eat the trees and make their dams out of them and then create habitats for a load of other species. Without the carcasses which have been half eaten by the wolves, there's very little for scavengers to eat, so that's a whole other food chain which you've cut off there. They have a vast range of often counterintuitive impacts, and so we see wolves as a destructive force, as killers, but they're actually life givers. They're a creative force which can help to restore ecosystems. Just the thought that they're there, the thought that somewhere among those trees one might be watching us as we're talking, the sound of them that you might pick up in the distant hills in the evening, hearing them howling, that's enough for me. I mean, I'd love to see them as well, but it's enough for me to know that they're there. That in itself enriches your experience of nature.
One of the biggest reasons why Britain is so far behind the rest of Europe when it comes to predators is because we just don't believe they belong here. It's an attitude problem. We're happy to see other people around the world living with carnivores, and we're more than happy to criticise them when human-carnivore conflicts results in deaths of big predators. But we are just unable to accept that we too had predators and have a responsibility to bring them back. And this is all due to a fascinating social phenomenon called shifting baseline syndrome. We met with Paul Jepson, a rewilding ecologist, to talk more about how efforts to rewild Britain are being influenced by shifting baseline syndrome.
So we've been exploring this really transformative journey through rewilding, and now that we've gotten to the carnivores, we're noticing that perceptions really start to harden up, and this is where it seems to have gotten but no further. Can you tell us a bit about why that might be?
I think some of it may relate to what we call the shifting baseline syndrome, which is quite a big idea in rewilding. It comes from fisheries, but it's this idea that every generation assumes that the natures we experience in our youth or when we're studying or whatever are the natural. And over time, we lose track of what the natural baselines were. Of course, when it comes to predators, in Britain, our ancestors wiped out the big predators, centuries or millennia ago. So there's been generation after generation for whom the nature of Britain hasn't included predators. And not only does predators not quite seem part of the natural order of things in the UK, I don't think we know how to live with predators. We've lost the sense of just how abundant birds used to be, even back in the 1970s or 80s, because we're not, we come into a place like this and we see the odd bird and we think, oh yeah, that's how it is. That's the sort of natural bird abundance in it. And it's hard to imagine a place with more birds knocking around in it. So this is really the idea of the shifting baseline syndrome, that it's just this gradual accretion of our concepts on what nature could be, such that at the moment in the UK, our notions of the natural are at such a low ebb that it's almost hard to imagine what they could become.
So to give us a bit more of an idea of the scale of what we're talking about here, could you give us some examples of shifting baseline syndrome? So
in some ways, here's quite a nice place to think about those notions of shifting baseline. So if my daughters come down here at the moment, this for them is natural. It's got beautiful trees around it, there's a river. If I'd come down here in the 1970s with my girlfriend, I'd have been seeing something quite different. There wouldn't have been these trees around it. It'd have been a much more open landscape. There would have been cows in these fields. It would have been full of meadowsweet. There would have been swallows buzzing around on it. There would have been butterflies. There would have been a hum of it. And for me, that would have been natural, okay? So my daughters have a totally different sense of baseline to what I did. Equally, if we go back to before or around the foundings of Oxford, 1200, 1300, this would have been a meandering river with sandbanks in it and water lily pads and fish coming up it. It'd have been quite a different thing. Let's go back 1,000 years. This would have been all braided in it with deep beaver dams on it. It'd have had willow scrub bushes and aspen coming on it, and it'd have been just full of frogs and birds and whatever. And probably if we went back even further, you'd have heard of aurochs coming down here. But actually where it is now, it sort of looks all right, but there's very little microhabitat diversity in it. It's just tree, little glade, hard edge, straight down, channel, back up, flat, back up. It's really in poor shape.
So relating to the ecology side of shifting baseline syndrome, do you think it's possible that we can reverse what we're seeing here?
Oh yeah. I mean, fundamentally, I think this is what rewilding is about. Okay. So, the shifting baseline syndrome is really just a story we've told ourselves about, subconsciously, about what nature is or should be. But once we recognise that, we can tell stories of what nature can become. The shifting baseline can be negative or positive. Creating a positive shifting baseline, that probably is something we can do. It really is.
Conservation, and particularly rewilding, is so much more about people than it is about wildlife, the landscapes. So how can we rewild the people? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Rewilding, I think, offers human beings just as much as it offers non-human species. It makes our world a richer, more absorbing, more engaging place to live. It can sort of widen our horizons and show us that there are non-controlled, non-managed ways to exist, at least for part of the time. And that element of freedom, that element of letting go of yourself, is something I think we could all do with a bit more of. Let's face it, most people have been really shut off from nature in this country. You know, they've got very little opportunity to engage with nature, very little time and very little knowledge also. And one of my hopes is that as we have richer ecosystems, we can also bring people with us in learning about those ecosystems and understanding what we're seeing and what's special about them. And that really has to start with kids. You know, some of the work I've done has been with adventure learning, getting kids out into ecosystems, often for the first time in their lives. You know, you have to stop them throwing themselves into the nettles because they've never seen nettles before. I have no idea what they do. And that's been some of the best days of my life, is taking kids out into nature. You just see them waking up to it in a really thrilling way. And that's an essential part of this story, is getting kids out of the classroom, into wild places, rather than having them sat on their butts all day long staring at the teacher and the whiteboard.
So in terms of this new idea for environmental education, again, it's a lovely idea, but what are the actual barriers? What are the challenges that we have to overcome or get around if we want to make this dream a reality?
There is one barrier, and one barrier alone, and that's funding.
Right.
Because I've never come across a school which doesn't want to do it. And I've never come across a kid who doesn't want to do it. You know, there's massive enthusiasm for doing it, but all the funding's been cut. And we're seeing government after government saying we're very much in favour of outdoor education. We really approve of this idea and we want kids to be outdoors discovering the world. But there's no money. It's just a matter of political will to spend that money where it needs to be spent.
Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to swing around completely. There we go. Yeah, keep going. And now we go back. So that's been absolutely fascinating. I think for me the most interesting thing George said was about the elephant in the room, because obviously this is an elephant adapted landscape.
It's actually the elephant in the room.
It is the elephant in the room, and we can still see this. These species of tree here, there's birch, these willows down here, they've got these adaptations for elephant browsing. If you break them in half, they will coppice. That's how coppicing evolved.
And you can't see it here, but if you had a hedgerow, that's the reason why we have hedgerows today, is because the branches can sort of twist around each other as a result of being broken by these huge mega herbivores like elephants and rhinos.
So it's another shifting baseline.
Yeah.
I think we need the elephants back.
Yeah.
Let's go do the elephants. Okay, rewilding with the elephants. Yeah.
Let's go. Let's go. Wait. Okay. Before we do rewilding the elephants,
Yeah.
I think we need to talk about something really important.
Okay.
Which is diversity and inclusivity in rewilding.
Yes.
Because these conversations are completely pointless unless everyone's voices are heard moving forwards. So maybe we need to speak to some people about that.
I think we do.
Let's go do that. Come on.
Oh, we're going?
Yeah,
Let's
we're
go
going.
do that.
We're going.
Rewilding the people is clearly as important as rewilding our landscapes. But to achieve this, we need the input of all people, from all walks of life. So we sat down with two voices who are pushing for inclusivity within the rewilding movement. Hannah Needham of Heal Rewilding, and environmental journalist and activist Jasmine Ira Qureshi, to talk about increasing opportunities to get involved with rewilding and discuss the barriers that some people still face engaging with nature.
The perception that people from cities or people from ethnic minority backgrounds or young people, they're not interested, is based purely on the fact that you don't see them very often in the countryside. And that's due to inequality, not a lack of interest.
And that means that people, for example, minorities, people that live in cities, these people's perspectives are often left out of the conversation. They need to be able to contribute their ideas and opinions to this sector in order for us to progress any point in the future.
Having time to volunteer is just, it's a luxury that most people don't have. Family commitments, work commitments, a massive one is what you're physically able to do, because so many outdoor opportunities need you to be able to trek through undergrowth and all that kind of stuff.
What are those main barriers that we're seeing that are preventing both the rewilding movement and nature conservation in Britain more widely just being more accessible for everyone to enjoy?
We have lots of people in perhaps sectors that aren't given as much money that then aren't educated on things like wildlife and conservation because they haven't had enough freedom to be allowed to explore wildlife as a luxury.
The sector was calling for everybody to help nature, but only making it possible for some people to help nature. I had a very privileged upbringing, but I did live right next to the M4, right under the Heathrow flight path, so I never heard birdsong, and my family didn't particularly go outdoors in nature at the weekends, so I didn't have that exposure to nature and wildlife.
For example, myself when I was younger, I would look at these shows and these books and everything, and I just wouldn't see anyone who looked like me or had any sort of similar shared experience that I did. And that would tell me that I'm never going to be able to do that job because I can't see myself standing in the shoes of that person and doing that particular job, so I'm not even going to try.
We need so much more access to rewilding in terms of volunteering, in terms of jobs, but also in terms of being able to get to these places.
We need to open up that boardroom and that discussion to people from various backgrounds, perspectives and ideas who aren't necessarily qualified in the stereotypical way that we suggest they should be qualified to talk about these issues.
If we need to mobilise everybody, we need to be talking to everybody and making it possible for everybody to get involved.
I think the big problem we've got to tackle is connectivity. How do we link up these habitats? I mean, how do we learn to live with animals and enable them to cross the road so that our whole society works with nature?
We need more people who think differently owning land. You know, if everybody thinks the same and it's sheep, cattle, chemical farming, then we are truly faced with ruin.
What needs to happen next is that our policy, NGO and political leadership needs to be more radical.
And we need more people in media who talk about wildlife with the passion that the professionals talk about it, but they talk about it in a relatable way.
I think something we have to really come to terms with in Britain is that we're probably 30 years off the pace and we're not catching up at the moment.
What I want to see happening in rewilding is gradual encouragement, in other words, gaining encourage as people are prepared to ask for more and more.
Quickest way to restore our species and prevent the loss of species is by getting absolutely everybody involved from all sectors, from all geographic locations, all ages, everybody.
We need to get minorities involved. You cannot do any sort of work in the wildlife conservation sector globally, locally, without getting minorities involved.
We have to do things now and we have to do things quickly.
Am I optimistic when you look at where we are and the challenges and the situation worldwide? It's going to be a very difficult time, but we can either act wisely now and start to do things, the answers to which we may not know and we may never see them come to conclusion.
I mean, as humans, we're a bit messed up at times, but we've also just got such amazing potential. And that potential, over history, it has shone through.
I hope that people feel wildlife in their everyday life, that they get a chance to experience these fantastic animals that I've been privileged enough to see.
You know, you can look at all the rubbish which is going on at the moment, but there is some sort of vibe going on in society at the moment where people are saying, look, enough. Let's go for what our human potential really is.
You have to do what you can in a life. That's the only alternative there is.
I think we are at the beginning of a new enlightenment on it, and I've just got to hope that plays through.
A few years ago, it was considered radical to reintroduce beavers You know, and now everyone's happy with beavers, that's fine. It was even radical to reintroduce pine martens from the places where they'd been absent. Well, hopefully, before long, it won't feel radical to reintroduce lynx. And then a few years later, it will no longer feel radical to reintroduce wolves and many other of our missing species. And eventually we get to elephants.
So it's kind of weird, we've now finished our degree, we're graduating.
4 years.
And this is the end of an era at Leeds University, but the beginning of the rest of our careers. How do you feel about that? Are you optimistic about kind of what we're going into?
I think if you'd asked me that a couple of months ago, I would have probably said no, because all the news is always bad. But I do think since starting this project, I do now feel a lot more optimistic.
When the general public is really interested and hopeful, that makes me hopeful.
Yeah, I like it. It centres us and it gives us all a job to do at home and abroad. It doesn't matter where we are, it centres us, and I think that's really important.
Our journey through rewilding in Britain has come full circle.
We've seen how this radical new science offers the possibility to transform landscapes, engineer ecosystems and restore lost biodiversity.
By moving forwards towards a future where hopefully nature and people can coexist.
There are still many, many challenges to overcome, and it'll be a long time before these guys even have a shot.
But rewilding hopefully offers the chance that the future might just be that little more wild.